So welcome everyone, my name's Katrina Novakov. I work at Red Hat as a Chief of Staff for our EMEA Services division. And I'm going to talk to you today about Open Leads the Way and how we can apply open practices and ways of working to improve performance. So today we're going to cover the impact of the pandemic, and then we're going to look at how you can create a safe, blame-free environment, how you could create an open structured environment, and how you can adjust your mindset to think more openly and curiously, and then why it's important to just start and try something new. So to begin, let's look at the impact of the pandemic. So I was thinking about the last kind of 15 months, about everything that's happened, and it's basically been unexpected disruption. And when I've thought about words that I've associated with the pandemic, I've realised it's a lot of new language that maybe we didn't use before. Words like social distancing, flatten the curve, unprecedented times, which is one that often gets repeating, the new normal. And it's amazing how quickly we adapt to this new language that we never really thought about or used before. And in a similar way, businesses have had to adapt to these changing times and alter how they manage and work within their organisations. So a survey was carried out by Harvard Business Review that was sponsored by Red Hat, and we asked hundreds of executives from different business sectors globally to share how the pandemic had affected their company's digital transformation efforts. Many people were forced to reevaluate their priorities and to create new strategies to adapt to the changing times. And within this report, it covers technology, people, processes, culture. And I'm just going to highlight a few of the key findings in this presentation. So to start with, digital transformation, 95% of global leaders surveyed said that they thought that digital transformation was even more important now than in the previous 12 months. But however, 26% believe a major organizational challenge is that there is a lack of clearly defined digital transformation strategy. So it's really important, but the strategy isn't quite in place yet. When looking at culture, the majority, 84% of executives say that having the right culture is important for digital transformation, yet there's still hurdles. And I remember looking at this kind of figure in various different reports previously, and it's always been in the high 50s, 60%. So for it had to jump to 84% is quite a leap. Prior to COVID, adopting new cultural challenges and changes was difficult. And I think that the pandemic has now caused businesses and forced them to adapt to the changes. So we're realizing that culture has to change and we need to pay attention to it. And I think part of this change is because there's a greater focus around retaining talent, because it's so much harder when large numbers of people are working in home offices. And this quote here says that executives need to do everything they can to make sure that remote workers continue to identify with their companies. And I think people that have been working at home have kind of gone through mixed stages where sometimes they feel really close to their colleagues when they're talking on video with them. And other times they can feel a bit distant and removed, they miss out on things and they don't always know what's going on. So I think it's a bit of a hurdle how included you feel within your company culture. 79% of people from the survey said that attracting new talent and enhancing people's skills are higher priorities than they have been in the past. And another goal is to foster corporate team building and loyalty amongst employees that work at home. And 47% of leaders plan to spend more money on collaboration platforms to support video conferencing, data sharing, and content creation. So as I've said, people have realized that these are now important, and this is where we're investing money into it. And when you're looking at innovation even, certain activities such as generating ideas for new products are tough to do in these remote environments. And these activities rely in part on informal interactions and chance encounters. And this quote here says that smart organizations will put processes in place that make informal meetings more feasible when people are working remotely. And this is an interesting survey from McKinsey that took place last June. And it looked at executives who listed innovation as their number 1 or 2 priority pre-COVID and today. So the dark blue ones are what people thought innovation was like before, and the blue ones are today. And as you can see, pharma and medical supplies are the only ones that are prioritizing innovation today. So if we take the information from the last slide, where basically when you're working from home, it's harder now to innovate. And you look at this slide where kind of industries aren't really prioritizing it. the statement from the last slide, which said that the smart organisations are the ones that are really going to focus on innovation. I think that's key today, and I think the ones that are going to be innovating are going to be the organisations that are going to be more adaptable and move forward and be ahead of the others. So when we look at agility and the biggest barriers that people have to organisation speed, we can see that the silos and the lack of cross-functional collaboration is a top concern. And I think this is very common when I've spoken to other organisations. Slow decision-making is also an issue, along with a lack of strategic clarity, rigid policies, and formal hierarchies. And I'm sure that many of you are thinking, yep, we've got these problems in our organisation as well. They're very common. So when you look at these challenges, we need to ask ourselves, how do we accelerate digital transformation? What should we do to improve? Sometimes this is kind of the wrong question. So I like this quote that says, people are looking for solutions without asking, why do I have the problem in the first place? So we're kind of quick to jump to see how we can improve things, but why are they occurring? And okay, it's not just COVID, these problems were occurring before that. So really, what is the root cause of these problems? And I think when you look at digital transformation, organisations often focus on the digital part and they don't focus so much on the transformation side of things. They're quick to getting new technologies, but they're really just replacing one bit of tech with another, and they're doing things in exactly the same way. And it's important that as well as the platforms, you also look at the people and the practices. And so this is why this presentation is going to focus on the cultural aspects and why it's so vital today for organisations. So what is culture? So culture is a group of people that form certain mindsets, behaviours, habits and values which influence how we act, including how we communicate and how we collaborate. So when you can have an organisational culture, but you can also have subcultures within that organisation. This is different teams. They have their own ways of working, their own ways of thinking, their own habits. And it's also important to note that organisational cultures are unique. You can't just take one successful culture from an organisation and try and apply it to another one. It doesn't quite work like that. If you think of a financial institution or a nuclear power plant, these are quite structured, rigid and controlled. And if you try to kind of apply a culture that's suitable for a startup that's very agile, where you kind of have a person doing several jobs at once, they're not really compatible cultures. So bear in mind that when we kind of look at cultures, it's very unique and you kind of have to apply what's suitable for your organisation, not just take what somebody says as the perfect culture to do. Having said there's no unique culture, what I have seen is that people that actively participate in open source communities tend to be highly effective in distributed remote teams. So if we're looking to improve how people can work more effectively remotely and in a distributed environment, we can take practices from these open source communities and apply them to our organisation. So before I talk about open source communities, I just want to cover what actually is open source. So open source is a development methodology made possible by specific licensing decision. It refers to something that can be used, viewed, modified, and shared. So the most common example is a piece of software. You can use a piece of software. You can view the source code, which is the programming code that a developer has written. You can then modify that code if you want the program to do something else. You can then compile that code, use it yourself, and you can also share that with others. And then the software license that's applied can dictate how you can use and share that software. So for example, if you make a modification, the software license may say that you have to share it back within the community. Another license may not permit that. So an open source community, an open source software community is a group of people united by a shared purpose of developing, maintaining, extending and promoting a specific body of open source software. Now, these communities are globally distributed. They're all across the world, and it's people made up from different roles, from different industries. And they're all united by a shared vision. They all have a common purpose and a passion, and they have a common vision. And so they work together to produce a better result. And this is what Red Hat does. We're basically focused on open source. We look at how open source communities do things, and then we apply them to our organization and we share these practices with our customers. So obviously we apply software development methodologies, but also we look at the ways of working, how you can relate and talk to each other and communicate. So we like to address challenges the open source way. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to talk about how you can implement cultural changes based on open source principles. So we'll look at safety, structure, mindset, and then just starting and getting on with things. So safety. I'm going to talk to you about psychological safety, which is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. It's all about being comfortable and being yourself and being able to express yourself without the fear of negative consequences of self-image, status, or career. And what safety looks like can be different for everyone. Some people feel comfortable giving feedback or negative kind of criticisms and constructive advice in one-to-one conversations. When they're in a team meeting, they may be a bit hesitant to share their views with everyone else. And if you're in a bigger setting, like a company meeting with hundreds or thousands of employees, they may be very hesitant to speak up and share their opinions. And psychological safety was kind of brought to focus by Google in 2015, where they published a study about what they saw as the 5 attributes for a high-performing team. And psychological safety was by far the most important of these. So you can look online for psychological safety and you'll find a lot of different information. And one thing I found was that there is an assessment that you can do. And basically what this assessment does is that it lists 7 statements. And with your team, you basically ask individuals these questions and they say to what extent they agree or disagree with them. And what I did was I created a Google form basically that just shifts these questions into them. And then for each statement, you just rate from 1 to 5 how much you agree or disagree with it. And then you can kind of collect the results from the team. You can put it into nice graphs and you can discuss this later. So with these 7 statements, I've listed them here. But for example, if you make a mistake on this team, it is often held against you. And then you kind of rank how much you agree or disagree with this. I like to also ask additional questions. So for one team, I really wanted to focus on collaboration because I thought there was poor collaboration that could be improved. And I really wanted to measure this and then to measure it later in the future. So I added an additional question. It is easy to collaborate with members of this team. And then I also like to add a comments field, which is just an open field where the person can put any comments that they like. And this is useful later on. So wherever they put in the free form, you can kind of see what the different people put, and then you can pick out trends. So for example, somebody might put, I'm hesitant about speaking up, people don't listen to me, people ignore my views, people talk over me, and you can kind of pick out these common trends as you go along. And then what I found was once you run this survey, what do you then do with the results? And say if you've got a survey results and it basically says there's very low psychological safety in your team, what do you then do to improve it? And then looking online in books and all sorts of websites, resources, this is where there was information that was lacking. And I thought, right, I've got these results, what do I want to do? So luckily within Red Hat, we've got experts within this field. So I kind of went to ask them how we can navigate through this. But I wanted to highlight this to you. So I think it's really good to do this assessment to see where your team is and how you can make improvements. But do prepare before you go into this to make sure that you're not just going to kind of make things worse. So do prepare what you can do going forwards. So some of the tips that I found was, first of all, be cautious and involve the right people. Depending on how psychologically safe your team is, you may want to involve people from the HR team, or you may want to get an external facilitator with expertise to help you navigate these situations. You could also get a people manager or somebody with really good kind of people and social skills to help out. And then you want to set the intention. So everybody in the team should agree that they want to be better and improve their performance. And that's basically why you're here running this questionnaire. You can then, with the team, share the results that people have got, and you can present the overall scores on charts and then ask people to comment on them. You can then identify the top issues that you'd like to improve. And then it's good to perform a specific exercise. And again, this kind of depends on what the statements were, where there was issues identified and how kind of poorly or wellly the ranking was. So if we just take an example that members of this team are able to bring up problems and tough issues, if people don't feel that this is the case, and you know the team very well, you may want to focus on, say, conflict. Now, when you kind of talk to people about these topics, you don't want to make it personal. You kind of want to look at the team as a whole. Obviously, if there's a problem and it is just due to one person that's bringing the whole team down, it should be addressed. But I would recommend this is done in a more private manner and to involve the HR team within these discussions. So you could look at how often is there conflict within your team. And if there's no conflict, that doesn't mean everything is okay. It could just mean that people are so hesitant, nobody speaks out about anything, and everyone just keeps things to themselves. So think about, how is conflict dealt with? How do people feel about it? How comfortable do you feel disagreeing with other members? And then you can kind of run an exercise based around conflict. And then I like to kind of finish the session by asking people, which 3 to 5 actions or behaviours can we, as a team and each of us individually, do to improve psychological safety? And it could be, you could be saying, all right, I'm going to be more patient. I know I sometimes speed things up and don't always take time for people. Somebody could also say they want to give their feedback more often. They don't feel like they speak up. Somebody else, a manager, could say they want to celebrate their team's successes more and encourage that within their teams. And somebody else could want to encourage silent voices to be heard and leave a space for people to share their voices. So there's all kind of mindsets and behaviours that you can do to create psychological safety. So I've just listed a few here. So I would say value truth and be open to criticism. Don't kind of live in denial. It's always good to know what reality and what's really going on. Focus on the problem and not a person. And assume good intent. So if somebody says something you disagree with, kind of ask yourself, what is the person's intent? Why have they said this? Have they kind of said it just to annoy me? It's probably not the case. They probably have a valid reason why they're saying what they have. So be curious and try to understand them more. And then kind of change your mindset. Don't think my team will be annoyed if I disagree with them. Think about, my team expects me to speak up. Now, of course, you have to create this environment to encourage people to speak up and to share their opinions. So you want to encourage people to ask questions and to ask for feedback and then act on that feedback to show that you've listened. And it's especially good for leaders to show vulnerability or failability, admit they've made mistakes and basically lead a good example for others to follow. We want to remove blame and replace it with curiosity and focus on what you can do to improve and learning from what you've done in the past. So some practices you can do for creating psychological safety. You can create a social contract. So this is basically before you start like a project or a workshop, you can just have a blank sheet of paper or a page, and you create an agreement where team members define the way that they want to work and behave. So this could be kind of core hours that you work. It could be that you want to have fun, you want to be present in the meeting, turn your phones off, don't get distracted, you give people your full attention, show people respect, keep the culture. And be honest. Whatever your kind of the values that you and your team come up with, it maybe you kind of want to, learning is key for you and just sharing your opinions. And then we encourage people to kind of sign this bit of paper, and it just basically shows a commitment that we're all agreeing that, yes, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to behave and work together. And then once you've kind of established that throughout the project, it's good to hold retrospectives. And these are opportunities to reflect, inspect, and adapt ways of working. So often at the end of a sprint or after a small piece of work, you can then run these, but they can be done at any time. Traditionally, people just tend to have like a lessons learned at the end of a project, but then it's kind of too late to implement anything. So the idea is you do these regularly throughout, and then you can make adjustments as you go along. And here's one example where, as a retrospective, you can look at the goals, you can see what's helping the team, what's delaying the team, and what's risky for the team. There's different kinds of retrospectives. So some of them are also what you should continue doing, what you should stop doing, what you should start doing. So you can basically just pick what's relevant for your team at the time. So just search for kind of retrospectives and you'll get a load of information. So that was safety. Now we'll move on to structure. So I'm going to share with you the concept of an open organisation. So a conventional organisation is a top-down approach. They focus on the what. It's all about planning and prescribing what you do. Then as we move up the chain, managers often focus on organisation. How are we going to organise the teams to carry out what we've decided? And then the why is kind of the thought about last, and it's a small part. Why are we doing this? Well, I'm getting paid. I want to get money. I want to get a promotion. That's why I'm working hard on this. And this is kind of based on efficiency, and it's more suited to a static environment. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's often seen kind of in these rigid control environments, factories, and industries that have more regulations. But the thing that it doesn't allow for is an ambiguous world that has lots of changes in, like we're facing now. So the opposite is kind of an open organisation, which is a bottom-up approach. It starts at the bottom, at the why. And this is where really everyone has a shared purpose, a shared passion about why we're doing things. It's not just about money. It's really to have meaning in what you're doing. Then when we move up to the how, it's kind of about the culture. How should we get things done as a team? Who should be involved to kind of get the best results? How would this help us achieve our mission and our purpose? And then when you look at the what, this is kind of the smallest part. Leaders may then kind of set the direction, but they should be open to change and to feedback. Basically, you can try something out, you can get feedback, you can modify it and build upon it as you go along. So it's kind of a different structure. The open organisation is kind of more seen in a startup, is kind of the extreme, how agile they are and adaptable to change with people taking on different roles. So if I asked you, is your organisation more of the conventional approach or the open organisation? Often it's hard to say it's one or the other. Oftentimes you'll see pockets of both of these within your organisation and within different teams. So people are generally somewhere in between the two of them. So a good way to look at this is to look at degrees of openness. So rather than saying, are you closed or are you open? It's how closed are you or how open? So you think about where you are on this kind of timeline or chart. You can kind of place yourself somewhere and then say, what do I need to do to be like 10% more open? Or, where are people being more closed and more open as we go along? So in the closed environment, trust is earned, information is protected, people are kind of hoarding stuff and thinking about themselves. Whereas in an open environment, trust is given and information is shared. It's much more transparent. So within Red Hat, when we looked at the kind of the conventional approach and Red Hat, we listed 5 characteristics that we see within an open organisation, which is transparency, inclusivity, collaboration, community, and adaptability. And I don't have time to go into this, but if you search for open organisation online, you can get lots of information about it. So when looking at organising your structure of an organisation, it starts with leadership buy-in. How is the organisation and the team structured? Think about how you want to have teams collaborating and working together. Is there cross-functional operations going on, or is it very much siloed? And you want to look at what kind of incentives drive behaviour. So when you think about what it takes to get promoted or a pay rise or a bonus or recognition, how is this done? Is it based on kind of individual performance, or is it based on any team metrics? When you're rewarding people, are you looking at trust and cooperation, or again, is it just individual effort? And don't underestimate the importance of middle managers. Managers are the ones that help associates with their training, their career development, they conduct performance reviews, they recruit new people to the team to see if they will be a good fit for the company, and also budgeting. They decide where money goes and what it's allocated to. And these managers are really the ones that we want to model the behaviour for what we want to see within the organisation. So another way to kind of get cross-functional collaboration is a concept called communities of practice. This is where there's a large group of people who share a common concern or a passion, and they interact regularly to improve their understanding and produce a better outcome. It's all about learning. Within Red Hat, we have internal global communities for all Red Hat roles to collaborate and to help solve our customer problems. These can be technical or non-technical. Lots of other organizations have communities of practice called slightly different names, and there's various kind of successes in whether they work or not. And a lot of it tends to be that people aren't just allocated enough time to work on these. They're passionate about it, but just other priorities come up and they don't always take place. So it's important for organizations to make sure that people have the ability to contribute to these communities in order for them to be successful. And an advantage of them is that they can take down hierarchies and promote cross-functional collaboration. They can tap into everyone's unique abilities and skills. And also you can hear new ideas from anyone, no matter of your position or your role within the organisation. Another concept that is really important to implement is an environment of a fail-fast culture. So the idea about this is that you can work in iterations, you can work in small chunks, you design experiments that fail fast and fail small. So basically, you don't want to be working on a project for like 9 months, a year or something like that. And then at the end of it, you think, oh, this isn't really what we wanted to do. It's not working. We now have to bin all of that. The idea is you can work for a few weeks at a time. You can see what's working, not working, and adapt as you go along. And that will help you get a better result in the end. So constant learning, constant reevaluation. You should also consider the costs of failure. So when it comes to something being in production and something goes wrong, what is the impact on the customer? How is that going to impact the customer experience? How is it going to impact your reputation? Are there any financial penalties that you'll have to be paying for it? So failing early in the process can help to spot defects and errors before deployment. And then it's important to train and equip your people. You need to build new skills, and this can be done via pairing and mentoring, so having people collaborating and working together. And you need to have the tools to support all of this. So an example is in some organisations, certain groups have their own kind of budgets for what tools they use. So some teams may use Slack and other teams may not use it. So if you're trying to collaborate on a project where only some people have access to the Slack chat groups, the collaboration is not going to be the best. You kind of need tools to support how you want to work. So I'll give you an example of a government, British Columbia in Canada. So what they wanted to do was to improve the relationship that they have with the citizens of the country, and also to help collaborate more with tech companies and developers. So what they did was they built a platform to allow this collaboration and to be more agile. And so they built this and it allowed them to collaborate more, and it was a really good use case where they ended up reducing the cost of how much it costs per app by 10 times, and then also to have 10 times less people per application as well. So it's great that they wanted to improve the relationship with the public, but why did they really want to do this? Well, behind this, it comes to a story. So there is there's a Mount Poly, which in 2014 basically is a copper and gold mine, and basically the tailings of this mine basically got dumped into Mount Poly Lake. And what this caused was a massive disaster. The water was polluted and it basically wrecked the town. And when the people tried to find out what was the reason for this, they couldn't trace the paperwork back when they tried to look for it. And so the citizens were in uproar that nobody was held accountable for this. And this was the reason why the government wanted to work more closely and be more open and transparent with their citizens. So when they took an open government approach, this allowed facilitation of collective civil action. By implementing this new technical platform, any citizen could now contribute to the open source code repositories, and they could really have their say within the jurisdiction. Legislative policy debates could also happen in open source repositories. So previously you could just vote or you could complain about stuff, but now you can actually discuss these policies out in the open with everyone. And this allowed for complete transparency. It also completely revolutionized their procurement methodology. It became more agile. This was all visible in GitHub. You could have external developers paying for certain sprints, and it removed the costly and time-consuming RFP process. And by implementing communities of practice, it allowed them to break down silos and to have cross-jurisdictional collaboration. So an example of this is the Ministry of Transportation used some of the source code and applied it to what they were doing. So it was just reuse of code, and it's allowed more citizens, employees, and entrepreneurs to be engaged. And basically, the government operated more like a startup company. So now we'll move on to mindset. So mindset is how open leaders think on our best days. So within Red Hat, we like to default to open. Everything that we do, we try to be as transparent and open as possible. And obviously, there are some things that we can't be open about, such as financial regulations, how much people pay within the company. So we start with open, and then we basically close down things as and when we need them. But we believe that everybody has something unique to contribute. We believe that everyone has untapped potential. We believe everyone benefits when we all put the mission first, and everyone has a responsibility to lead. And we try to keep these thoughts in mind in how we operate day to day. So have a think about, how do you within your organization think? Is there a mindset that you share with your colleagues, or do you all kind of think different things and are a bit misaligned? I'm sure there are some commonalities that are present in your culture. So we believe that open source culture enables self-sustaining, constant innovation and transformation. So we try to be open and share as much as possible. We put our customers first. We choose agility over agile. So we don't just do practices for the sake of it. We do what's suitable for the environment. We test internally and we try to think big. So I'm going to give you a customer example of Deutsche Bank. They wanted to improve their experience for the banking customers and back-end tech users, and they wanted to shorten the development cycle to get products to their customers quicker. So they built an open source PaaS solution to simplify DevOps collaboration, optimize capacity, and increase efficiency. And they basically applied a lot of techniques that I've mentioned to move from traditional approach to an agile, flexible integration, iterative work, and automation. And they've managed to cut down the end-to-end app dev time from 6 to 9 months to just 2 to 3 weeks. And the quote here says, transformation goes beyond the infrastructure and applications to the capabilities you need and the way that you work. So by changing how they've worked and using the technology, they've managed to have this digital transformation. It's a combination of the people, the processes, and the technology. They're all very important. So moving on to the final section, just start. So oftentimes you'll sit through like presentations, you'll read documents, you'll read books, and you'll get a lot of information, and then you're just quick to move on to the next book or something. But really, you just need to, take some ideas that resonate with you and just start. And I recommend to avoid long-term roadmaps. Just do enough to get you going. Think about those short-term sprints, break things up into small chunks, identify the key challenges and focus on improving those. As I suggested, you can establish the social contract to set the stage of how you want to interact with others. You can do regular updates to ensure that you progress and that you know people's workloads and challenges. Don't assume people are okay. Do check in on them. Do ensure that stuff is moving along and help them out if they're blocked with anything as well. And then you can hold retrospectives to see where you need to adjust and move forward. And transparency is key. So you need to make sure you provide access to view, comment, edit, documents and other materials. And as I mentioned before, make sure the tools are in place, chat channels, things like that. And I encourage you to share drafts, not just the final versions. It's easy for people to want to be perfectionists and just share the final version, which is kind of a PDF lockdown document. But do get in the habit of sharing editable files. And that's how you kind of improve the quality of work. Some people can be hesitant to do this because they feel like they're wasting people's time and they should be doing things themselves. But it's just this mentality. You're a team. You're all trying to accomplish the same goal. So working together can produce a better result for the company, for your customers, for everyone. And basically pair programming. So this is where you sit with somebody else and you code together. But it can be extended beyond just programming in everything you do. If you're writing a presentation, if you're writing a document, share things with people. And the last point, celebrate your progress. So, I talked about failing fast and moving on and learning from your mistakes. But, when things go well, do share those as well. It's really good to encourage the team to get them motivated. And here's an example from Barclays. So they said that we need to deliver products to market quicker and to be more responsive to market trends. We want to become the bank of the future. We want to be more dynamic in the way we produce applications and make better use of our underlying hardware and software as well as our staff. So they implemented a DevOps approach and a PaaS environment, which allow developers to work more efficiently and to release updates and features more quickly. They also introduced self-service capabilities that cut down provisioning times from weeks to just hours, and it freed up staff to work on the new valuable projects instead of the routine tasks. So this is where they can work on all the innovation and really the stuff that differentiates the organization rather than back office activities. And I like this quote, we can think of an idea, try it, fail, learn, and make adjustments. Culturally, that's a big change. So as you can see from some of the examples I've given, a lot of it is tech focused, but they couldn't have done it without these kind of cultural changes. And hopefully throughout the presentation, I've given you some ideas of maybe you can take 1 or 2 of these learnings and apply them in how you're working and just discuss them with your team. So as a summary, the first point was safety. You need to feel safe to try new things out, to experiment, to openly discuss things, and be in a blame-free environment where fail fast leads to fast success. You want to encourage teams to experiment in a structured environment where you can fail quickly and you can make those improvements as and when needed. You need to be able to collaborate with others and see how you can think differently. See how you can learn to perceive failure as fine-tuning processes and spot errors and defects. Change your thinking from failure is not an option to failing fast means learning early. It's all about kind of learning and growing. And number 4, just start. Try something new. Work in small iterations, those small workloads, design some experiments, and just get going. If you're interested in learning more, there is the report that I spoke about at the beginning of the presentation that you can view to see more of the statistics that we have there to learn about what the leaders have changed during the crisis. And then also, it's not just about technology, it's about building high-performance team and cultures. So there's some links here which our Open Innovation Labs focuses on, and they can deal with psychological safety, the open organisation, open leadership. There's some cultural training that's available, and there's an open practice library, which is a free resource that gives you some practical advice on what you can apply within your organisation. There's the Open Organisational Book Series, and then also we've got the Open Source Programs Office. And basically, these are a special group within Red Hat who speak to customers and partners who decide to integrate open source principles within their organisation. And there's lots of blog posts and things there that you can take a look at. And then what I'm going to do now is just copy and paste a SlideShare link to the slides that I have, because I put a lot of links in the slides. So if you're interested, you could take a look at the slide deck and actually see all of these links there that are available. And there's a lot of great content that can help you. And most of it is free, so you can start using it straight away and hopefully just get you kind of thinking a bit differently. We've also been running an open leadership enablement program. So this is basically 9 interactive webinars from May until July. So we had one this morning that spoke about collaboration. We had one on the 3rd of June that spoke about psychological safety, which is the Inclusivity Matters talk. And basically, if you sign up at this link, you'll get access to all the previous recordings. They're all free, and they all basically talk about the topics I've been mentioning to you today. It's all about collaboration, working together, how you can change your culture, and all the things that will help you, along with your technology, to really be a leader within digital transformation. So thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, please do ask. Happy to answer anything. I don't think there's any questions, but if anyone wants to follow up, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Katrina Novakov. I think I'm probably one of the few ones that are on there, so I'm quite easy to find. I'm happy just to have a further discussions. I can kind of provide you with some further resources if you're interested. If you have an opinion on how you've kind of done things within your organisation, it's really interesting to find out what you found that works for you and what doesn't work for you. A lot of these things are kind of trial and error. As I said, keep trying things out, seeing how it goes, and then sharing with everyone else so we can all improve and work better. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference.